Facebook literally just unfriended all of Australia. I'm not kidding. Facebook unfriended the entire country of Australia. I'll tell you why. It's Rob Nelson Live. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Friday night Rob Nelson Live show. I'm sitting here freezing in Florida, but it's not as bad as it is in Australia. Facebook has unfriended Australia. I'm not kidding. They have blocked all users in Australia from posting any kind of news content at all. Any kind of links related to news. If you are living in Australia, you can't post any news content anywhere. If you are not living in Australia, you can't post any news content that is from Australia. And if you are an Australian news publisher, you can't even post your own content on Facebook. I'm not kidding. There have been massive calls to delete Facebook. They have said basically, if you post news from Australia, you can't. Facebook will block it. And again, this means if you live in Australia, you can't post news content, period. You can't post news content from the US. And if you live anywhere in the world, you can't post any news content from an Australian news site. Any at all. Why is this happening? Well, there's a law that the Australian legislature is trying to pass. And that law would require Facebook and Google, and it could apply to other digital platforms as well, to agree to pay a small portion of their ad revenue in exchange to the news publication. So if I'm a news publisher, the New York Times, whoever it is, if I'm an Australian news publisher, I put my content on Facebook repeatedly, I get a little piece of that revenue stream from Facebook, and same with Google for searches. And the law is an attempt to kind of say, hey, you guys control so much of the publishing, and traditional news outlets are losing track. They're just going under. They can't stay afloat. So they're like, give us back a little bit of the revenue because people share so much news on Facebook. People, and again, we're going to get into the idea that some listeners on my show will say, Facebook shouldn't be for news. But the reality is people use Facebook like a news platform. A lot of people get all their information from Facebook. And in response to the request, this law that's going to be passed to require Google and Facebook to pay a little share of that to the news publishers, Facebook said, F you. We are going to block all news content on Facebook. Now, who got affected by this? Obviously, all the major news publishers. But it goes way beyond the major news publishers because effectively, Facebook blocked more than just that. They blocked any site that had the same name. So there's a Daily Mail in Britain. So the Daily Telegraph. The Daily Telegraph in Britain got blocked. The Sky News, which is also in Britain, got blocked. Not just in Australia, got blocked. Period. 4 regional Australian health services, which use Facebook to spread COVID-related information, the actual state health agencies, got blocked. The Immunization Federation of Australia, which spreads important information about vaccinations, not just for COVID, got blocked. All kinds of charities got blocked. And you say, Facebook doesn't block people. Why were they blocking those guys? I mean, why are they blocking the health services? Because they have sharing news links. But here's the thing. This was punitive on Facebook's part. There wasn't an accidental overreach. They overreached. And I'm going to get into whether they should block even the news sources. That alone is to go, whoa. But they overreached. But they didn't deny it. They said we intentionally spread the ban really wide. Because if they do the ban, if they ban it, then they can say, we don't have to pay you any money because we're not carrying any news content. They spread it really wide. And they said, because the law was a little vague about what is news content, we wanted to spread the widest net to respect the law. I mean, they're literally flipping 2 middle fingers plus at Australia going, since you didn't say exactly what it is, we're going to cover the widest amount we can just to respect you. It was literally like a, but here's the thing. This is the crazy part. The law is not even in effect yet. The law hasn't even been passed. So Facebook blocked all news content. And I'm going to repeat it again. All news content, period, about Australia cannot be shared anywhere in the world by you or anybody else. And if you're in Australia, you can't share any news content anywhere. You can't share U.S. news content if you're in Australia. And if you're an Australian news publisher, you can't share your own content on Facebook. But the law is not in effect yet. So Facebook did it before the law went into effect to be like, really? You want to mess with us? We'll show you what happens when we shut you down. I'm going to get to why. I know some of you get frustrated when I call it cancel culture, but why I think cancel culture and what happens when the big tech platforms are silencing people has nothing to do with politics. It has nothing to do with just, taking like extreme opinions off the platforms. It's an overreaching control that these giant tech platforms exercise and the power they can do it with. So, when Twitter pulled down President Trump's Twitter account, I was like, not a good idea. I don't care how bad what he's saying is, not a good idea for a Twitter to be that powerful. Well, now Facebook is saying, if you want us to share a little of our revenue from the billions of dollars we make in ad revenues from carrying news content, F you. We'll just take all news content off. No one can share it. And the consequences of that already were terrible. I mean, charities were losing money. The health services were going crazy, but much less just the freedom of speech censorship alone. I know, Monkey Arms, that you say you can get all your info, and you've made this point before. And, I'm guessing you're pretty highly educated, and I'm guessing you don't live online, although thank you for living online to watch Rob Nelson live because you're a regular viewer. But that's not the point to me, Monkey Arms. The point isn't, the argument isn't you should get news from somewhere else. It's sort of like, maybe you should, but the reality, and this is what I've been trying to say, is we don't. So many people rely on social platforms to be so much more than just a platform for sharing with their friends and family. And the platforms know that. They make billions of dollars off of news content. They make off ads because of news content. So the reality is people do use these platforms to get news and information. And people do rely on them. So you've got like the charities or the vaccination organization, going, or the health services going, we use Facebook as a way to communicate with people. We use Facebook as a way to reach millions of people. And they rely on it as a news source. So the idea that a giant tech platform can simply censor out an entire nation from using news, from posting news of any kind from anywhere in the world, and force the rest of the world to not be able to see or share anything that comes from Australian news, it's like a blackout. You can say, well, look somewhere else, but that's the most watched platform for news. So the idea of saying look somewhere else doesn't really hold up. Because yes, theoretically people can, but when so many people rely on it and they have the power to literally exercise that control, it's devastatingly dangerous. Its impact is massive. Whether Monkey Arms, you and the others who find it elsewhere is not the point. It's the point that these platforms are a mainstream forum for most people to communicate information way beyond who their friends are. They make billions of dollars because of that. And to have the power to simply go, boom, we're shutting it down is scary. So the former Facebook CEO of Australia, former Facebook CEO from Australia, went on a campaign saying, delete Facebook. You went on a campaign, delete Facebook from your account. Now, Monkey Arms, you'd be like, yes, delete Facebook. The Australian Prime Minister had this to say. Scott Morrison's the Prime Minister of Australia, posted it on Facebook. Facebook's actions to unfriend Australia today, cutting off essential information services on health and emergency services, were as arrogant as they were disappointing. And he went on to say, this feeds why so many people, so many countries are worried about the vast overreach of big tech and the danger that could do. And then he kind of concluded it with an idea, and again points out the actions to unfriend Australia, cutting off essential information services on health and emergency services. Again, I don't care if people should find it somewhere else. This is where they find it. So it's not okay to take it off. But his point is that he said that large tech companies should not. Can we put that tweet back up or that post back up? Large tech companies. Next one, Crafty. Large tech companies may be changing the world, but that doesn't mean that they run it. And it's an excellent point because yes, they are changing the world, but right now they are also starting to run it. And that's, thanks, Crafty. Right now, they might be changing the world. That's positive, but they're also running the world increasingly. And that's frightening and that's scary. I mean, it's just stop and think about it for a second. Stop and think about the massive power that they have. And by the way, Google went a different direction. Google made deals. Google made deals with News Corp. Google made deals with the New York, is making deals with Australian big media companies and saying, we'll give you a piece. Now, without getting too into the weeds, here's the bottom line of this. Facebook argues, look, you guys, we're not actually, we're benefiting you because we let you put your stuff on our platform and you benefit from the publicity and you benefit from the additional clicks you get. But the reality is that Facebook and Google control they control the ads, the digital ads on their platforms, and they take the lion's share. I don't know what the percentage is, like 95%. They take the vast majority of those ad revenues for themselves and keep them. So they don't really compensate in any way. And that's why a lot of European governments and the European communities thinking about it, and France is thinking about it, and these are all left of center governments, Australia, that are thinking about doing this, are going, it's not right. You should share this with the publishers. And Facebook's action, it's, again, you might argue whether free, fair market they should or shouldn't, but Facebook's arrogance is what's stunning. Google went and made a deal. Google said, we'll do business. We'll pay you something out of our billions in dollars in revenues. We'll pay you a little to help keep you afloat. You are the news sources, after all. Facebook's arrogance is what's stunning. It's not even about, going back to Monkey Arm's comment, whether somebody should be able to go get it somewhere else or can go get it somewhere else and do just fine. It's the arrogance and the power. This law is not even in effect. And they are saying, here's what we can do to you. If you mess with us, we will destroy you. It's a blatant threat. And it's a blatant overreach and an awesome example of literally how much power they have. The reach is stunning. It's not even close to canceling celebrities. It's not even close to turning the president of the United States Twitter account off. You are telling an entire country they cannot post any news content from anywhere in the world. And the rest of the world, you cannot post or see any news content from Australia. And we're one company and we're going to do that rather than share a little bit of our money. This is why big tech's overreach is so frighteningly scary. How about people just follow the toes? I'm not sure.
Terms of service.
Oh, follow the terms of service. Thanks, Crafty. Well, again, you guys, you go into these arguments that I think are like down in the weeds of it. And again, it's back to the same argument of like, you don't need to use Facebook for news. That's not my point. My point is you don't need to use Facebook for news. You didn't need to use a phone to make phone calls, send someone a telegraph back in the old days. I mean, when they had landlines still. It's the fact that millions and millions and millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of people do. And you can't just cut them off. The consequences, the damage is frightening, but the power is what's most scary. When Facebook's that powerful, it can run the world. And whether you're getting your news sources somewhere else or you're looking at the terms of service, you are going to get screwed by them when they decide to do the next thing they do. And it's not just Facebook. It's the big tech companies in general. I'm glad Google actually made a deal. They were smart about it. But it's the reach. It's the arrogance of Facebook to do this. Even before the law is in place, just as you want to see what will happen, we'll black you out. Okay. Second story today has to do with Robinhood. Robinhood, if you remember, I'll give you a really quick recap. Robinhood Securities, Robinhood trading app, was part of a huge thing end of January 28th, when Reddit investors, led by a guy named Roaring Kitty, that was his screen name, led a drive to counter short selling on Wall Street, where hedge funds were basically selling a low priced stock into and selling it cheap to buy it back when it's cheaper and make the margin difference. It's called short selling. Horrible thing to do. Horrible thing for the U.S. economy. All it does is make hedge funds richer, make billionaires richer than ever before. And it blew up. Reddit users literally drove up the price of the stock, GameStop, from like $26 to $350 or $70 or whatever it was, and basically caused the hedge funds to lose billions. Robinhood, the trading app they were using, came in and stopped trading, froze it. So, well, they didn't stop it. They let you sell it, because if you sell it, the price will come down, but they wouldn't let people buy it. And it became a huge controversy. I've talked about it on the show before. And on the second end of that, the big tech companies came in and acted also to influence the outcome by Facebook pulling down the Robinhood trading group, Google and Apple pulling down negative reviews on the Robinhood app. And the whole thing was wound up in the fact that Robinhood was getting financed by one of the very big hedge funds that was losing money. So this week, Congress held hearings on it and called the CEO of Robinhood, the CEO of Citadel Capital, one of the big hedge funds that was part of it, and called Roaring Kitty as well, who's no longer a private figure, but is not a mainstream investor, but he led the drive. And it was pretty interesting. So Maxine Waters chaired the hearings, and the head, Vlad Tenev, who's the head of Robinhood, here's a little tiny bit that Dave Portnoy posted on his Instagram with Maxine Waters trying to ask him a question. Look at his face when she's asking him.
Isn't it true that being concerned about having enough capital to meet deposit requirements, isn't that a liquidity problem? Or could you just answer yes or no?
Chairwoman Waters, I appreciate the opportunity to address that.
Just yes or no?
We always felt comfortable with our liquidity and the additional capital that Robinhood raised.
Please answer yes or no.
We always felt comfortable with our liquidity.
I don't have time. I just need a yes or no answer.
It just cracks me up. Listen, I give Maxine Waters a lot of crap about a lot of things, but right there, I was loving her. Like, again, you know me, I'm the populist. Look at his face. And again, I'm not Vlad Tenev. I was torn. Like, is he good guy, bad guy? He created an app, right? He created a trading app that allowed for average investors to get into the mix and actually, trade it, and you don't have to pay commission on your trades, so it's more accessible. Kind of a democratizing of finance in a good way. But then when suddenly that takes off big and the little guys starting to make a lot of money and the big guys are losing money, he shuts it down and claims he had no choice to do it, which I've never bought for a second, and neither has Dave Portnoy. Dave Portnoy was on Fox Business and had this to say about Tenev.
Guy. Dave, you said you want Robinhood CEO Vlad Tenev to go to jail. Do you still think that? You still believe that?
Yeah, absolutely. Nothing.
Trading. You've got to get to the bottom of what they were doing that made him stop the trading in those stocks, right?
100%. I mean, he may just be a patsy. He probably is just a patsy, but he's still involved. But there's no doubt he was basically being used as a puppet. I think that's what happened with, Melvin and Citadel and all that. So, yes, but he's still complicit in it.
Dave Portnoy lost $700,000 in that trading on that. Because he kept going, I'm going to go in. He didn't lose it because he was being a stupid investor. He's like, I'm going to keep going in to keep the platform moving. Monkey Arms, thanks. Yes, much coffee today, but the reality is, guys, it's like 35 degrees out here and I'm freezing, so I talk faster when I'm cold. And I'm 2.5-hour show format, but I can slow it down a little bit if you prefer. I want to get it all in for you guys, and I am really wound up. Okay, so I'll get to, do I see them being broken up? I do, actually. I think we're starting to cross a thing, and I'll come back to that in a second. Let me wrap where the Robinhood thing comes around on this, because the big tech platforms did play a role in pushing this whole thing. Like I said, pulling Robinhood off Facebook, pulling down ads that were negative about Robinhood, hundreds of thousands of them on Apple and Google. The arguments that came up in Congress were interesting. You sort of had the two sides. There was a unanimous agreement from Democrats and Republicans that short selling needs to be looked into, that it's dangerous. But the the other side of it was, it's interesting how the parties align. Like a lot of Democrats were raising the question about whether or not the Robinhood style apps, which are, again, they're commission free, they're simplified, so the average person can trade on them more easily. You don't have to be a sophisticated investor. And people were going, well, is that right? Are you maybe just basically selling people into the process and you get them to trade more when they don't have to pay commissions? So you're just going to kind of luring, sharks into the fish tank, so to speak. And the other side, often voiced by Republicans, not completely Dems and Repubs on this, was, you're lowering barriers to entry, you're democratizing finance. And I think that's a fair argument to have. There's a battle between truly democratizing finance and obviously, not leaving regulations so open and unregulated that the average person can just get screwed. But all of this comes back to me, a battle between the elites and the populists. And the elites encompasses a lot of people. I mean, a lot of groups of people, whether it's the political elites, whether it's the financial elites, the corporate elites, even the institutional elites, like, whether it's the State Department, CIA, whatever you want to say. And this notion that the average person isn't smart enough to make their own decisions. I mean, because that's underneath that argument. Are you sure you want to let people just be trading like crazy? And to his credit, the CEO of Robinhood said, look, the amount of money people put in our thing is they aren't all selling, they're holding on to it. They're not, you can look at the trade out. People aren't just selling everything off like crazy. They're holding on, they're investing, they're growing. But it's this argument, you're not smart enough to take care of yourself. And I think the truth, what they showed is that the average investor is pretty smart. And again, doesn't need you to handhold me and protect me and cover me up. Like, I may make mistakes. Dave Portnoy said that a few weeks ago. You people will make mistakes. You learn the hard way sometimes, but that's okay. And I'm wary of the government trying to regulate and control too much when it comes to what I can do, me, the investor. But I do like the idea that they regulate the powerful entities, which is to the idea of, will Facebook, Google, big tech companies like Amazon, Apple be broken up? I think we're moving toward some kind of a breakup. And yes, it is a rigged system, Monkey Arms. I 100% agree. And that's why I'm kind of on the populist bandwagon I'm on. Because I think what we're seeing in all of this is a true battle between the populism and the elites. In the Robinhood case, the populism was the day traders going out and making, putting the hedge funds, beating the hedge funds at their own game, and people making money and people losing money. In the case of overall, when we look at Facebook and Google and what's happening in Australia, again, it's not about finding your news from somewhere else. It's about the fact that one single private company, a tech platform, has the power to censor an entire nation from posting news and an entire world from seeing news on their platform. When they are viewed, their platform is not a small platform. Billions of people use that platform. And they can go, we can do this to anyone. We can do this to any country we want if you don't do what we want. That kind of power makes the Facebooks the elites. They used to be the tech startups. They've become the elites. And I do think we're going to see them get broken up. I think we're going to see them start being broken up and regulated in a different way, because I think now we're starting to see the danger of this at a wide level. I want to just pop up one tweet that came from a Democratic congressman from Rhode Island about the Robinhood thing. And so as I said, he's a Democratic congressman. He said, if it is not already clear that Facebook is not compatible with democracy, threatening to bring an entire country to its knees to agree to Facebook's terms is the ultimate admission of monopoly power. And I point out that he's a Democrat because, again, that's not a Republican. This isn't about the cancel culture aspects of it. Thanks, Crafty. This isn't about the cancel culture aspects of it. This is about the unchecked power. And that would be my point. Facebook and Google, these guys represent the biggest threat to democracy we have. They may not consciously be trying to subvert democracy the way you might say you think Trump was, or certainly the people who attacked the Capitol were, or people who thought the whole election was stolen and were going to do whatever it took. But they are essentially starting to subvert democracy. They are at great risk of subverting it, and they have a monopoly power exponentially greater than monopolies ever had before. And they had a lot of power back in the days, the oil, the railroads, even the telecoms, but certainly the original, the oil barons and all that, they had enormous power, but they couldn't really subvert democracy. They could mess with it. They could kind of buy it. Facebook, Google, these big tech companies literally have the power to subvert it. And they may not intentionally be going out saying we're going to, but as they accrue more and more and more power, and as more and more people rely on them, I mean, cancel Facebook, like, okay, delete Facebook. Most people won't. It's like we're addicted. As a global community, we're addicted to these platforms and we depend on them for everything. Maybe some of you don't, but most people in the world in some way, shape or form depend on these social platforms. And when they have the kind of power they have and when they start exercising it in such blatant ways, it does become the precursor to subverting democracy, especially in the wrong hands. And who knows whose hands those will be? We only know what they're doing right now. And it's not benign. I don't think it's literally I'm trying to undercut democracy, but it's not benign. Facebook isn't doing this benignly. They're consciously going, we will mess with you for trying to get a piece of our revenue stream, even if you deserve it. And we will do it up front before you even put that law into effect to show you how damaging we can be to you, to show you how much we can hurt you. That's frightening. It's a frightening abuse of power, and it's a frightening amount of power. Something to think about. Okay, going to wrap up on the last story here. This one's a little unrelated, but kind of not. Ted Cruz. I like to be fair to both sides. Ted Cruz, senator from Texas. You all know who he is. Texas is like in a freeze down. The power grid goes out. Not going to dig into the weeds on that whole thing, but for those of you who want the quick version, Texas is the only, this is just funny. Have you seen this man, Ted Cruz? I'll tell you why in a second. Texas is the only state that runs its own power grid. There's like the Western grid, the Eastern grid, and then Texas. They have their own independent power grid because they're going to, one day secede and they want to be Texas and we, do it all ourselves and Texas strong. And so when everything got so cold, they didn't have the natural gas. That's a mess up on their part, on the part of the utilities. To deal with it, they needed to borrow power, and they can't because their grid's Texas. They can't borrow from the east to the west. It's a little similar to what happened in California in the heat wave, in that the utilities are like screwed up in how they're managed, and it's slightly different with California, but both Texas and California, California had with the heat, Texas with the cold. And so the whole grid got messed up and Texas froze, and people were dying and out of, hundreds of thousands of people out of power. They declared a national emergency. One of you pointed out on the show how I think in a DM to me how Biden, did a national emergency and didn't make a big deal out of it like Trump would have been, or threatened Texas because they didn't vote for him. But Ted Cruz went to Cancun. He got on a plane and went to Cancun this past week in the middle of it. And he got caught. And he said he was doing it because his daughters were cold and out of power, and he was trying to be a good dad, and they wanted to get out of town. Really? He was senator from Texas. And his defense was, and conservatives have come to defend him and said, look, it's not much he could have really done anyway. I mean, he could be online. It's not like he's the governor of New York or the governor of California, where you're the chief executive. He's a senator. So, what do you expect him to do? Okay, real quickly here. First of all, the optics alone are miserably bad. Secondly, he has been critical of people leaving, violating their own COVID restrictions, going on trips, the whole deal. Like Gavin Newsom going to the restaurant, all of which I've been critical of. You leave your state to go to Cancun to be a good dad when your state is freezing and dozens of people are dying and hundreds of thousands are cold and out of power, and you're the senator? Well, because what could I do? And not only does it piss me off on a level I can't even tell you about, like how completely hypocritical it is, but here's why it comes back to the elites thing. Ted Cruz is an elite, just like all the other people I've said are elites. Because what could Ted Cruz have done? Okay, couldn't pass a law. He's not running the state. I don't know. Let me show you this little image of what somebody else decided to do. Okay, that's Robert Griffin III, quarterback, NFL quarterback, right, for the Texans. He donates 10,500 meals to a Houston food bank. He donated 10,500 meals to a Houston food bank because of the cold. Thanks, Crafty. So you're Ted Cruz, one of the most powerful senators. What if you started a drive to raise money? What if you started just going out and donating food to people? What if you got on the phone and started making calls to people and saying, how can we fix this? Not from outside your state. What if you were on the ground trying to do whatever you humanly could to help the millions of constituents of your state, because you are a U.S. Senator, so you represent the whole state. What if he did that? But what's most offensive to me is not that he's a hypocrite, not that he couldn't technically do anything, that it didn't occur to him that that's what he should do. Instead, he had the privilege to take his daughters and go on a trip to be a good dad. How about being a good senator for your people? How about being a populist? Because he pretends he's a populist, but he's not. And telling your daughters, this is a civics lesson. I'm going to make sure you kids are safe, warm, and fed. But you're going to come with me, and we're going to go make a difference for people in need in our communities, even if it's literally just in the neighborhoods we can get to. That would be a leader. That would be a populist. But Ted Cruz, like Andrew Cuomo, like Governor Newsom, like Donald Trump, like the Democratic Party leadership, the Republican Party leadership, like the Zuckerbergs, and the Jeff Bezos, they all are elites, and they care about their power, their privilege, way more than they do about you and I. I'm a populist. I'm for populist. We're starting a populist movement, left, right, and center, coming together, and we're going to change this country. I'm Rob Nelson. Thanks for watching.